Hi and welcome to the LightLeaders, a podcast for lightworkers who want more money, power and impact. I'm your host, Alex E. Lambert. I believe that we are currently in the middle of a global awakening of humanity and that leveraging entrepreneurship is the fastest way to raise the consciousness of our planet. So in this podcast, I interview lightworkers and conscious entrepreneurs who follow their soul mission and have built a business around it. I call them light leaders, and this is the new paradigm. You will hear their stories and, more importantly, receive tools, tips, and strategies on how you can also impact more people and grow your business while following your soul mission. If you hear little nuggets you love and you'd like to share, screenshot this episode and share on your Instagram stories. Make sure to tag us at the Light Leaders Podcast and we will repost. Do you know what is probably the most valuable resource in the modern world? It's your data. Companies like Facebook, Apple, or Google, they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars because they spy on you 24/7, collect everything they can about you, and sell your data to advertisers. They also use this data against you to get you addicted to their platforms, so you spend more time on your screen and more to censor certain opinions and whistleblowers. Now, what to do? Well, I always prefer to look at solutions. And there is a phone that runs on its own operating system that is based on encrypted blockchain technology, not Google or Apple. It's called the Clear Phone. With the Clear Phone, you own your data and choose what you want to share with apps and service providers and potentially be rewarded financially for agreeing to share your data. To learn more, visit thelightleaders.org/clearphone, and you can also become a brand ambassador for them like I am. Hi, and welcome to this new episode of The Light Leaders. Today I'm with Rick Smith, and Rick has been a classroom teacher, an education consultant, and over the past 20 years, he has spoken to over 100,000 people in 15 countries on 5 continents. His best-selling book, Conscious Classroom Management, has now sold over 250,000 copies and continues to touch the lives of teachers and their students through years of working with students and then with teachers. He discovered simple principles for connection, aliveness, and kindness. These principles and approaches are at the core of his current workshops and retreats, including Authentic Relating and Awakened Leadership. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I'm super happy to have you. I've done 3 of your retreats now. I've done Awakened Leadership.
Right.
I've done Authentic Relating Level 1 and Level 2.
Oh, wow. So you're an expert now.
I relate very authentically. That's what people say.
Cool.
We'll talk about what it means to be a leader.
Sure.
Authentic relating in general. We'll talk about what I feel is a lot of where we can call shadow work and looking at the parts we have more shame on.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so there'll be a lot. And also I know with you, that's how it works also with your retreats. There's a lot of flow. There's a lot of unexpected, which is really cool.
Well, let's see where this goes.
I'm excited and a little bit nervous.
Me too. Both.
Both. Good. My first question, Rick, is very important.
Uh-oh.
What are you grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? Well, this is going to sound odd, but having the chance to be grateful, like just being in a body, that's what my big focus is these days. It's a bigger answer than you asked, but this sense of what I call unquenchable thank you. There's a quote from a Kurt Vonnegut book. He's an author, passed away some time ago. He said, in the beginning, everything was mud. Some of the mud was lucky enough to be able to sit up and look around. Like just to be able to sit up and look around. There's something like whatever experience I'm having, there's this opening to gratitude, to thank you. So I'm just noticing that as you ask. And then on a specific level, I'm grateful to speak and to dialogue with you and just to see what arises. Feels, like you said, exciting and a little nervous, and which is good. It's like on the edge that I want to be on.
The Tender Edge. That's the name of your website and brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want me to talk about that?
Let's do just a little bit about you before,
Sure.
and then we can go on the Tender Edge. Can you share a little bit what matters to you, like in 2 minutes, so
Sure.
people can see maybe what you stand for?
Kindness. Kindness with myself, primarily, and that expands to others. So welcoming what is here in my experience and what's happening with like uncovering the innocence inside of everything, every experience. So that's what's most alive for me these days. Is it's not that I don't have preferences. I have lots of preferences and I pursue them, but there's this underlying like, okay, how was your experience and how were you with your experience? That really really matters to me, like the underneath the surface, what's happening kind of underneath or adjacent to whatever the story is.
There's a tool you shared in one of your retreats that I use a lot in more challenging times, let's say, is when you talked about when you wake up in the morning, asking life, what do you have in store for me?
Oh yeah, every morning. I wonder what life has in store for me today.
Removes a lot of pressure from our shoulders when we think this way.
Well, as I was talking to your friend just a couple minutes ago, it's like one way I like to look at it is that the steering wheel I'm holding is not attached to the car. And I tell a story that I'm really in charge, and then not only am I not in charge, I don't have any control, but the grasping the steering wheel is the source of the suffering. Rather than going, okay, life, take me. I mean, you look at how like women give birth, and I don't care how smart a person is, they don't know how to do that. Nature is like way more wise, and we let life take me. Yeah, there's something edgy and scary and relaxing at the same time.
What was free will in that? Non-existent?
It's a longer answer. So the more we awaken, whatever that means, the more we deeply listen to the impulses of life and follow those impulses, the more we have what I would call, or what's often called, the choiceless choice. Like, we don't have freedom to do all sorts of things that we used to do, in the sense that if we're committed to listening, then things get very simple. And so I don't know about free will. I think it's one of those wonderful paradoxes that I'm not supposed to figure out. But it's like it's an impulse. I want to be able to do what I want, and then things arise that make sense. It's like what's needed versus what I want to do. And a lot of the time it's the same, need and want. And if it's not, then there are some options there. And I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, we're here in Ubud, and there's a lot about surrender, but there's also a lot about manifestation.
Yes.
And in the middle, the co-creation,
Right.
where life happens to you, but you also have the power to direct it. And actually in spiritual communities, that's something quite dividing, where some people are, you're a powerful manifester, you're God, you create everything. And some people would view it as what this life has in store.
I kind of lean towards surrender. At the same time, there's a line from, believe it or not, the book Eat, Pray, Love, where she said all her life, her prayer was always the same, thy will be done. And then a friend said, if God is made up of all the separate consciousnesses, then yours is part of God, and you can actually have specific desires. And so there's this and I believe that. So there's this really interesting paradox again about surrender, and to surrender to what is wanted and what I want is often the same. Yeah.
We've already gone pretty deep.
We've gone deep.
I was thinking
Let's go shallow. Should we go shallow for a bit?
A little bit, because usually I like to also
to soften and
give
how's
4
it
5
going?
minutes, 3-4 minutes for also your past. Get interested into how.
Oh, it's a very deep past, though. So.
Yeah.
So skip that.
Because you were teaching teachers, and you have that book that became a bestseller.
Sure.
And personally, I know you as that inspiring person in Ubud that is really part of the spiritual communities and having the retreat. So how did that evolve?
Well, I became a school teacher, and I started offering teachers things that would have helped me get better. And one of them is what I call assume the best about kids. And that principle of assuming the best about kids, I discovered over time is that it's assuming the best about everything. And that it takes away a lot of the edginess of life, and it opened up a whole new, almost mystical dimension as I was embodying it over and over again in my work and in my life. So there's that element that kind of evolved. And then the other element that I would share with teachers is what I call growing into inner authority. Now, you've heard these terms because I've taught them in my retreat. And inner authority, it's not being authoritative, it's being relaxed and open and saying yes to yourself as in whatever arises. Mm. And so those two principles of assume the best and inner authority ultimately are what one might call very spiritual concepts, because there's no limit to either. It's an infinite continuum of going deeper into welcoming, letting life have her way with me is assuming the best. And then noticing where I'm apologizing for whatever is coming up. By noticing that, I can be with where I'm in inner apology and then move towards inner authority. So all of that arose over time as I was teaching teachers and embodying that. And at some point, I just felt like I wanted to be more direct. Teachers are there they want very practical strategies, which I gave, and that was great. But I noticed I was really enjoying the parts where I could talk about loving ourselves and loving kids, using a different language, kind of sneak it in there. And then I realized, and all the time I was teaching workshops, I thought, maybe I'll teach workshops. And the company's doing great. I have other people running it for the most part. Mm. So I have this time to explore. And I noticed, like my sister, who's an artist, I asked her once, why do you make art? And her answer really inspired me. She said, I make art so I can breathe. She said, sometimes it's a pain in the ass, but I make art, I can exhale. And that's kind of why I teach and facilitate. Something is very selfish in a certain sense. It's like it lets me relax to have the forum. So even though like I'm nervous as we're talking, there's something alive coming from my belly, like that's arising just to be able to have a forum to speak. So there's something in it that I don't understand, but I keep following the thread. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, these are really concepts I take on also in my life, assuming the best and inner authority. Mm-hmm. When I was at the retreat, I worked a lot on not being apologetic when I take leadership.
Yes.
Which was part of my conditioning somehow. Wow. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's a tricky one because for me, it's not even about not being apologetic. It's about being aware of it. Just the awareness is often the only step that's needed. Because there's a natural inclination in the body to stand up, to wake up. And so if we just notice the patterns and name them and notice the feelings, that's often all we need to do. And all of a sudden we're like, oh yeah, there's that pattern. And yet here I am in a more upstanding way.
You don't fight it. You don't think, oh, I shouldn't be apologetic.
No. That's just being apologetic about being apologetic.
Yeah, it's like judging the judgment and all these loops.
Yeah, same thing.
That's very tantric in a way, to observe without, sometimes I read Osho a lot. He talks about in spiritual communities, sometimes you fight, that's how I should be.
Right.
And you judge a lot. Well, in the Tantra view, it's more, there might be indulgence, there might be things less aligned, but I watch them. And by watching them, it dissolves.
Well, my understanding of Tantra is that it's about, there's, what do I know? But the essence of it is about welcoming everything. Mm. Yeah. And the reason that Neo-Tantra is so big in the West is because the West has traditionally not welcomed sex or sexuality at all, or very little. And so Tantra became sexuality. But it's really about welcoming everything. So when I looked at my retreat, and you look at the chakras, like we actually went through all the chakras about, survival and death and power and community and genius and expression. Like we went through all of the 7 chakras, but I didn't call them that. But in that sense, it's very tantric. It's about welcoming what is. it's not necessarily about having sex. It's about welcoming whatever's here. And so...
Well, sex is probably the part in our lives in general where we have the most shame and repression around.
I don't know. I think it's a big one, but I think things around survival and death, like the first chakra, it's like, think about how this is something I believe. People are more comfortable talking about their sexuality than their money. How much money do you have? Like, I'll talk to you about my sexual positions, but it's like money is like the survival thing. It's even deeper in my experience.
We had a pretty intense part around money in your retreat, Awakened Leadership. And actually, it's interesting you talked about the chakra, but you don't label it then this way. Same with Tantra. You don't talk about Tantra, even though when I went there, I thought, oh, it's pretty tantric in a way. You call it Awakened Leadership.
Yes.
And at first, when I saw the title, I thought it would be more shallow in a way. That it would be more, oh, that's public speaking, that's high, these techniques to be a great leader, which ultimately it's part of.
Right.
But it's a lot of deep inner work. Yeah. And I guess that's where the great leader comes from, in your view, and is that why you call it Awakened Leadership?
So yeah, thank you. The traditional concept of leader is someone who has it together, who is performing leadership and doing it the right way, whatever that is. And to be an awakened leader means to be deeply listening and to be welcoming all the parts of oneself, including the nervousness and the insecurity and the helplessness and the feeling lost and the feeling shame. Like, as we allow that and we be authentic with that, that is how we move mountains in the world. Think about people you've followed just in business, bosses that you've had or whatever. And if they're welcoming you being yourself rather than you having to fit into a certain model, it's so much more relaxing. And it leads to more productivity and all that. But from awakened leadership, it's about awakening. And then the traditional thought of leader is someone who has followers. But from my perspective, leading yourself is a tall order. Just deeply listening, and because every impulse to follow life's impulse, we're swimming upstream in a certain way. We have to be willing to let go of the crowd and do our thing. And that takes a lot of self-love and care and kindness and tenderness and willingness. And so in a certain sense, leadership and awakening become the same thing. They kind of blend together. And so, yeah, people who see awakened leadership, they, oh, it's about, techniques for removing the crowd, which I talk about. But presentation is a wonderful doorway into presence. Because when you have all the eyes on you, everything gets magnified, and then you get a chance to notice and welcome parts that were dormant or hidden one-on-one. But when there's 30 pairs of eyes, everything gets... So that's why we use presentation in the retreat, so that things get magnified. So it's very accelerated. Like, you can be up in front of a room for 2 minutes and move through stuff that can take days and days or forever, one-on-one or in small groups, because of the energetics of the attention. And so I take advantage of that. And it's all very gentle, and because it's not about, I say in the beginning of all my workshops, you probably remember, this is not the Vulnerability Olympics. This is not about jumping through hoops. It's about being exactly where you are. And if where you are is, I just want to take a nap now. Great. I honor you taking a nap. That's what you need. Great. No questions asked, because it's not about pushing. It's about receiving.
That's what you call the tender edge.
Tender
being willing to go to the edge, but not pushing.
Yeah, tender edge, 1 foot in safety and resource, and 1 foot reaching into the mystery. And the reason is, if we jump, we'll have perhaps a big catharsis and a big experience, but because our nervous system isn't kind of conditioned for it, we will slingshot back into stasis. But if we don't touch that mystery, if we stay in full in safety, then we tend to be isolated. And so the idea is, how do we expand our comfort zone? Well, to do that, we have to be uncomfortable. It's by design. But if it's too much too soon, then we'll cocoon. And if it's not enough, then we'll stay cocoon. So it's finding that sweet spot where we don't have to go backwards later. And so it seems for some people who are like gung-ho, adventures in consciousness, it might seem slow, but you go very fast and you don't have to come back. There's no recovery. And I'm not interested in what I would call the vulnerability hangover after the workshop or after the retreat. It's like, if we go at a pace that the nervous system can integrate, then the wisdom comes and it flows. So it's a different approach than, it's more of a yin approach, I suppose. That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good deal of challenge, though.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. Well, sure. It's interesting because a lot of the kind of the gung-ho approach is a way of pushing away or trying to squelch parts of ourselves and to welcome ourselves, to welcome the young parts, to welcome the insecurities, to welcome the trembling, takes immense courage. But it's not a hoop to jump through. It's just a softening into, who am I? Oh, right, I am human. I have all these things, and they're coming up now. How inappropriate. What if I trust them? What if I trust the timing? What is this? What does this show me? And so, yeah, it is challenging in that sense. I call it like simple but not easy, if that makes sense. It's like very simple to welcome everything, but in the details, it gets complex.
It is definitely very liberating to also do that in connection, to share parts of myself I might have shame on, and to see that accepted, and to also see others do the same, and in that field, I feel like we all have our shadows, our parts we're less proud of, and that creates a lot of relaxation and connection.
So I want to talk about this just for a moment, because to welcome everything, it's not to welcome it so it goes away, because then you're not really welcoming. It's like, Alex can come over because he's got some good food and then he can leave and we'll eat the pizza. It's like, no, it's actually let him move in. And in a lot of circles, the thing that gets the most kind of negative review is shame. Guilt some, but it's like shame is the enemy. But I don't think shame is just shame. Brene Brown talks about shame is the awareness that you're on the tender edge. Like you're literally touching a new territory. But regardless of what it is, it's a flavor of ice cream. And you may remember I talked about crayons in the box. So you think about the big 64 pack of crayons, like the one I coveted as a kid. So like I'm really good. I really like sky blue and forest green. I don't really like magenta. I'm not comfortable with magenta. So think of that as analogously as different experiences. I have experience of forest green. I'm good, but magenta's like, okay, but when I welcome magenta comes in the box. And now I have a bigger palette, more color. And what's really cool about it is that as I'm welcoming magenta, a friend might show up to me and say, I'm feeling really magenta today, and I just had a sense to talk to you about it. Because they know on some level I'm welcoming that part of themselves. So then we get to guide others and all that. And so shame or guilt or anger or fear or all the good stuff, right? All the humiliation, all of these are welcomable as they are. And they might get bigger. We don't really know. But the welcoming is the muscle. And in other words, on a deeper level, when we assume the best, look, Alex, if you're choosing to wake up, okay, and I'm going to tell you, my belief is that you are, then everything in the universe, everything is in alignment to serve that choice. Everything. So there are no random things. When you have an experience of shame or blame or reactivity, it's not because you did something wrong, it's because it's coming up to be loved. Because you're saying, I want to love myself. Well, here's the next piece. And so it takes a lot of the edge off of something's wrong, I'm having this feeling. No, something's alive, I'm having this feeling.
And do you feel it's dangerous then in especially spiritual communities where you have, for example, the scales of frequency and shame being the lower frequency and people want it to be in the higher frequency?
I'm so unfamiliar with that. I mean, as you're saying it, I can get a sense of it.
High vibes only.
I don't think, yeah, right. I don't think of it as dangerous. I just think of it as an eddy in the river. You know, it's like, it's just a side, it's like you're going down the river and there's a little side thing where you go off and the current is moving and you're it's like, you know, it's like look, this life is a laboratory from my perspective. We're here to collect data. That's all and in a weird way, it's a safe laboratory. Even though people die and get injured, it's safe because we come back. And so all we're doing is just checking stuff out. It's like, I can honestly say that most of my life I've been exploring what love is not. This must be love. I try it on and I get disillusioned and try some. And there's, you know, it's funny, but it's also beautiful because I get to remove illusions. I get disillusioned one at a time. And so whether the frequencies or the gene keys or the astrology or the whatever, I mean, all this stuff has beautiful value. And how I am with it is more important, and I'll explore it. We explore it, and we say, okay, I take from this, I don't take from this. But if, for example, in my exploration of the frequencies, I have a judgment, an unconscious judgment of lower frequencies being bad, well, I have all the frequencies, so I'm going to be judging myself, and at some point, I will become aware of that, and that muscle of judgment will become more interesting to me than what frequency I'm on. And I'll start to, maybe welcoming myself as a judgmental person is where the aliveness is. So we find our way. It's like everything, it's like from the perspective of your life right now, if you look at your life from the past, you've been going all over the place. I mean, the future. But from your death, looking back at your life, it's a straight line. You're just exploring different fruits, different trees, finding out what works and finding out what doesn't. And learning to soften with yourself as you move. So that's kind of how I see it. So I don't have a big judgment about people judging themselves. It's like, you know, if you're not gonna judge yourself for having lower frequencies, you'll judge something else. It's like, this is where we are, and we get to learn how to soften with it. Does that make sense?
So you talk about judgment.
Yeah.
It's interesting, when I was at your retreat, sometimes we share judgments we have about others.
Yeah.
That's something I have shame about, because I still hold a lot of judgment towards people.
Sure.
And for me, one of the edgier thing to do wasn't that much to share about myself, but more to share a judgment I had about someone else.
Sure. And it's an interesting one, because...
And how do you play with that also in everyday life? Because it's very sensitive. I don't want to hurt people.
Well, so this kind of touches on to authentic relating. And there's I remember talking about this the other day, the welcoming everything. Someone took my level 1 recently, and I saw her the other day, and she said she's starting to get concerned that she's not sharing everything with people. I said, well, you don't need to share anything with people. Like, it's just to be aware.
So maybe before we go on to that, what's authentic relating?
Okay. Well, authentic relating is it's a focus. It's an organization. I'm part of the organization, and I teach various workshops. And authentic is being ourselves, and relating is connecting to others. And so doing it authentically is what it's about. And there's all these different practices and exercises that I like to think of as doorways into presence, like to focus on the type of communication that brings aliveness. And so she was saying, you know, I get concerned that I'm not sharing everything. And I said, this isn't radical honesty in the sense that we don't have to share everything that comes up. Like, I have judgments all the time. And my question for myself is, one, is it my business to share this? You know, am I not sharing it because I'm scared, or because it's not my business to share it? Right? And even if I am scared, I don't have to overcome the fear. I can say, I'm too scared to share. That's totally fine. Like, there's no should here. And so what is needed versus what is wanted. And for example, like, if you have a 2-year-old kid who wakes up at 3 a.m. and you're just so upset, the kid's crying, and your experience is, I just wish, I wish you were with your mother, right? I wish whatever. I wish you were never born, or whatever. You're not going to tell the kid that. hopefully, you're going to notice the thoughts, notice the judgments, notice the feelings, take a breath perhaps, and take care of business with a kind heart. So this is the quote from Walt Whitman that I share, is that he says, "Do I contradict myself? So be it. I am large, I contain multitudes." And so we can have judgments and we can be kind at the same time. So in your question, you said, I still have judgments. And my response is...
even when I said it, I thought, oh, that's judgmental of the judgment.
You got it.
Because I want to get rid of it.
Exactly. So there's this timeline that so now there's this thing where a better person doesn't judge, and I want to be that better person, so I have to get rid of the judgments. And then there's this tension in your system around when you notice a judgment, did it again, right? As opposed to, I contain multitudes. I have all sorts of noises. And we don't even know if they're our own noises sometimes. It's like we are in such contact with the radio stations in the world, and the consciousness and each other. It's like, so can we, it's like, as a being, in a certain sense, we're perfect. We just think everything is just perfect the way it is. And as a human, we're all over the place, lots of conditions. And the human being, that's what I call the namaste, is the marriage of these two. So if I'm judgmental and I can welcome myself as a judgmental person, that's all I have to do. I don't have to stop judging. But what it does do over time is it takes the judgment of judging myself away. And then there's just opinion. And it takes the suffering out of the equation. And as it does that, I can be, this is a whole other kettle of fish, but I can be present while I'm noticing judgments. I don't have to be judgment-free. We don't have to be a crystal clear pond in our experience to be present. We can just be with whatever is here, including a noisy head. So it's much like the bar there's no bar. There's no place to get to. It's like, here I am. I'm filled with contradictions. I have noises. I have judgments. And I'm here. And I'm not leaving myself. That's the message that, if I could sum up, is like to notice the noises, notice the judgments, and notice that place that it's almost like a muscle where, okay, maybe this is true about me, and I don't have to leave. I can stay right here. Yes, I'm having judgments. Yes, I feel ashamed, and I'm not leaving. And that choice to stay, to be with myself, to not abandon myself, that's available all the time. And it's almost not even a choice. It's just an awareness. Oh yeah, I'm here. So even calling it a choice puts this pressure on, am I choosing it? Right? So it's something more subtle. It's like an awareness that just grows as we keep exploring life. Yeah.
And you feel in spiritual communities there's a lot of tension created by making ideals?
Sounds like you do.
Yeah. That's what I was.
Yeah.
But do you feel it's just me?
No. It's really interesting, because I don't focus on spiritual communities. I don't use the word spiritual so much anymore. But I don't know that, this might be controversial, but I don't know that spiritual communities are any more spiritual than any other communities. It's like, there's people who like to trade baseball cards. And there's people who like to make money in business. And those people can be kind with themselves or not, just like people in spiritual communities. It's like we take we can do this very unconsciously. We take our family of origin and we project it onto gurus or teachers or communities, and then we try and fit ourselves in there, and we're moving, trying to get in to do the right thing, and it's just another hamster wheel. So it doesn't mean that there are not profound things happening in spiritual communities. It doesn't mean that people aren't beautiful in them. It just means that the structure itself is not the essence. The essence is staying with myself inside of whatever's happening. So, for example, if I'm in a spiritual community and say you're visiting, you say, Rick, you're totally in a hierarchy here and you're pushing away your smallness. For me to go, no, I'm not, and push you away, well, that's one option. But the other one is to say, well, I'm powerful enough that I'm manifesting this man giving me this reflection. So let me take a look at this. And then to notice that this is what I do with myself all the time. It's like, if it's true that I'm doing the wrong thing, right? If this is true, can I still love myself? Can I still breathe and be slow and feel my own tenderness? And the answer is always yes, it's possible. And so to stay with that part of myself that apparently is judging or is apparently competing, which happens a lot in communities, that's the essence of spirituality to me, more than any practice, whether it's meditation or yoga or any of the practices. It's how am I with myself? How am I when I'm discovering the tender parts, the young places. And for some of us, for me for a long time, the vastness was what I was pushing away. I was good with the small stuff, but like how great I am, how my genius, that was even edgier. So it's not necessarily one or the other. It's just to welcome what's here. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I'm not even sure what if the spiritual community is a community of people who are interested in practicing kindness. This is what the Dalai Lama said. They said, what's your spiritual practice? Is I practice kindness. And what does that mean? And it's every moment. And so a lot of communities, people will be pointing out all these things. And that's fine, but it's not necessary. It's like, okay, thank you. But how am I now? What's happening now?
It reminds me of a very edgy exercise in Authentic Relating Level 2, where you ask people to order themselves from who's the less spiritual to the most spiritual. And obviously, there's a lot of paradoxes in being spiritual.
Oh, it's great. It's a great one. So imagine, just to some people watching, so let's say you're going to put yourself, you're going to self-sort, and you're going to put the most spiritual people on one side and the least spiritual on the other. Well, the really humble people will go here because they don't want people to be upset with themselves and have to go through some kind of shame. So they'll just go like, well, maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to just, it's like, it's impossible to answer. And it's just done to bring up the awareness of the impossibility.
Yeah, and kind of, it disgusts you almost of the whole comparison game.
Right. And the reason we do that in Authentic Relating, the level 2, it's more of a focus on shadow. It's to reveal where we're already doing this. I mean, have you ever walked into a room and thought, yeah, well, I'm pretty much the most spiritual person in this room, right? I mean, I do it. It comes up.
I'm in this room.
Well, on this side of the room, right? So just like that awareness is not the enemy. The comparison is not the enemy. The awareness of it isn't the enemy. It's just to be able to laugh at ourselves. Oh yeah, well, I'm doing that too. And that's where the grace is. And so the idea of that exercise is, where are we already ranking ourselves? Where do we walk into a room and say, well, she's the most beautiful, or he's the most handsome, or I'm over here and I really want to be here. Like all of that noise that is hidden, that what happens is when all those noises are hidden, we isolate ourselves. And in the isolation, there's a loneliness and there's a calcification that can happen. And just being willing to go, yeah, this is what's happening. And it brings up the shame, because like those truths are kind of clothed in like tissue paper of shame. So we pop it, there's shame, we feel it, and then it relaxes, and then we have more crayons in our box. More room.
I could feel that shame coming because I could see myself wanting to be in certain places, comparing. It was really interesting.
So it has to be done in this, I don't suggest people just do this. It's like, it was a safe container because stuff comes up.
There were parts on being good looking also was an interesting one. And one also for money.
Oh, who has the most money?
Who has the most money. And there's also in Awakened Leadership an episode on money. I don't really have a question.
But you just wanted to say the word money on the screen. Hey, buddy, money.
I thought it could be do a nice 2-minute clip.
Right.
Something about money.
Okay. You talked to me about before we went on film here. Let's see. I talk about making friends with money. That's the title of it. And it doesn't mean making friends who have money. It means if money were a person, If money were an actual person, what is our relationship with this person? Black sheep, beloved, and everything in between. And as we look at money as an alive person, like literally like in form, even though it sounds like a stretch in the mind, as we embrace that possibility, we begin to catalyze awareness of how we, pretty much everybody, has pushed away money. We've used it as a means to an end. How does it feel when you're used as a means to an end? It doesn't feel good, right? So how do we kind of language our relationship with money? And then the chief element of that is to listen, because good friends listen. So have we ever listened to money? And I'm sure we all have. Like here in Bali, there's people who are struggling. So sometimes I have an impulse to give money to people on the street or people in the rice fields, and sometimes I don't. And I'm doing my best to listen to does money want to flow from my pocket to their pocket? Does money want to stay inside me? Does money want to invest? But it's not in order to make more money, it's in order to make more friendship with money. So that's a 2-minute version of a 5-hour piece that we do in the retreat that only happens after 3 days in when everything is kind of settled. So good luck with that. But I thought, you asked, and I thought I'd mention
it raises a lot of emotions
Yeah.
when we do that exercise.
It always gets the biggest kind of grumbling and breakthroughs when you focus on money. Yeah.
Taboo topics. We talked a bit about sex, money.
Yeah.
How about death, Rick?
Oh, death isn't taboo. Death is great.
Yeah. People aren't very comfortable talking about death. Like you talked about the dinner table. It's not a very popular topic.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've had a lot of death in my life since COVID started. The biggest one was my 2 dogs were poisoned on the same day. This is just 3 days before I taught my retreat. And then my mom passed away, my stepmom, all these different things. And so I don't think you knew this was going to go there, but what I found was for months and months, almost every morning, just on the yoga mat, stretching. I don't do yoga because that's too high fly. I just stretch, right? But the grief would get so intense that I found myself like literally floored, like face down, sobbing, like snot and tears and shaking. The pain of loss was so great, and for so long, one loss after the next. And something happened somewhere along the line. It's hard to describe, but it was like at the bottom of that grief was a sense of ecstasy, was a sense of like almost like a forced surrender. Like I was literally brought to my knees. And in that surrender, like there was absolute pain and there was a sense of awe at the same time. And it opened up a doorway. And I'm still aware of it. And I'm aware that grief was what did it for me, but every experience has at its center or its base ecstasy. Like that's why I was talking about unquenchable thank you. That there's just any experience, however horrific, as we surrender and receive, there is this grace that comes in. How does this relate to death? I don't know. I'm going to tie it together. But death is the awareness of each moment. When we embrace our death, we start to see that every moment is precious. And that every moment is this unquenchable thank you, this doorway into ecstasy, that if there's no future, well, I'm just doing the dishes now, but later on I get to eat the dessert. Well, doing the dishes is all that's happening. And if I were to die while I'm doing the dishes, what does it say on my tombstone? Here lies Rick, who died doing something he didn't really want to do to get to a good thing later. Or here lies Rick, who was embracing exactly what was in front of him in the moment. And I think the awareness of death, it's not just the big death when we stop breathing, but it's every moment. I mean, it's no mistake that we inhale and we exhale. Every exhale is a death. Every exhale is a letting go or a possible letting go. And even between, there's these micro moments. And so I mean, it's so funny because COVID, as horrific as it is, in some ways, there's some gifts in it from my perspective. One is that humans, especially Westerners, have to embrace death. Like, death is part of the deal. We are going, it's like the one thing we know and the one thing we avoid is that people are going to die. You watch how governments freak out and they do all these things to avoid being seen as the one who had people die on their watch, but people die on their watch anyway. It's a fascinating paradox. So there's embracing of death and there's the embracing of uncertainty. Because in COVID, like, there's no, like, the ground has been we don't know what's going on. And that's what death does. Because we could die any moment, there is built into the human condition uncertainty. And so the embracing of death as the beloved or as death as present, it opens up this whole world of I don't know. Not I don't know from inner apology, but I don't know from celebration. Like, I don't know. It's a mystery. And like, from that lens, like, this is what I've been noticing a lot in my interactions with people lately, is I keep seeing how people are manufacturing certainty in their lives in order to push away death. The death of every moment, not the big death at the end of their life. You know, and my awareness of this is certainly because I'm doing the same thing. I'm making structures, and so I'm tracking this for myself. Like, where am I creating, I would say creating false certainty, but all certainty is false. Because we're basically falling down an abyss, trying to grab on the sides. Like, if I ever write a book around this, I'll probably call it Throwing Anchors into the Void. Because that's what we're doing, is all these efforts to try and steer the bus, you know, or hold on to certainty, when the uncertainty, which comes from our awareness of death, is the ultimate refuge. It's the ultimate place of nurturing. It's terrifying and it's nurturing at the same time, if that makes sense. And I don't know any way around it. I've certainly tried all the ways I know to kind of ward it off. But at this point in my life, I'm like, okay, so nothing has worked. I'm aware that life is uncertain. I've had moments of embracing it. I want more of those moments. Nothing else is as important.
I was on a vision quest recently, and one of the things that came up from it was, because often on a vision quest you want clarity, was also how much I liked the unclarity and the surprises that life sends.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting one, because, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like, so I've been embracing in my life not knowing what to do, like what my purpose is or what I want to do. And then what's been happening is I'm now teaching these things. Do I want to go online? Do I want to go big? Like, I keep trying to be with what does life want, rather than what my ambition wants. Or maybe my ambition is an expression of life. It gets kind of confusing. But there are certainly moments in my life when out of the deep uncertainty comes clarity. I'm going to do this now. It's like wild horses. Like, I'm going to do this. And it happened many times in the last couple of years in teaching, like, I'm going to teach this retreat now. And how do I know? I don't. I mean, you know, when you go to workshops or retreats, and oftentimes the first question is, why are you here? Everyone goes around, and my answer is almost always, I'm here because my body brought me into the room. I don't know why I'm here. I can have lots of stories. Well, I want to improve this, or I want to do that. But bottom line is, it's like my first authentic relating workshop. I get the Facebook invitation and I was pissed. I'm like, a bunch of yahoos doing something, welcome everything. No, they're just going to be just making money and ripping people off. And I remember complaining about it as I registered for the course. I'm like, shit, I guess I'm going. And I walked in and was like, wow, this is real. Now I know why I came. But my mind was doing this, but my body was, so there was a surrender to the unknown, the uncertainty, which brought me into the room. So there is vision, there is certainty, there is clarity, but it's not by standing on something, it's by dropping into the nothing, and then seeing what arises, what remains. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Rick.
We're
getting close to the end of this episode.
I thought we were just getting started.
No, I think we're close to 50 minutes now. Yeah, it goes fast.
Thanks for watching so far.
And I have an unquenchable thank you for you too, Rick, for sharing your truths, sharing where you've learned, and always being so authentic and vulnerable in your share. It's very inspiring.
Thanks. I think I want to say one more thing, if that's all right.
Yeah. Well, go.
Okay, I don't know what it is. In authentic relating, there's a really simple practice, which is something I do all the time now, which is, what am I noticing right now? So I'm going to just share that. So what I'm noticing is I feel a little sped up. Some noise about I should have been slower. I feel like we're just starting, and I feel like I'm a racehorse at the gate, like chomping at the bit. So there's an excitement, an aliveness. I feel closer to you, like I'm getting to know you better, just in the way you're asking questions and where your focus is. And in the beginning, when you said, Rick, you can contradict me, you can push and pull. It's all like there's something that I really am grateful for, and I just feel grateful for this opportunity. So that's what's happening right now, and I'm noticing my body, like I said earlier, like my belly's more open, and there's just this more energy happening. And the reason I'm sharing this is, one, because we're connecting, but two, because that simple practice of what's happening now in relation to my connection with you or connection to this moment is an immediate entry into the present moment, and it can change everything because it's all happening now, and most of the time our minds are in the future or the past, and we miss these golden opportunities to just literally notice what's here. So I wanted to put that in as a practice, certainly for myself, and if anyone else wants to try that.
And hearing this,
yeah, you're gonna do it too, huh?
I feel that I don't really want to share how I feel now on camera. I have that shyness,
yes,
and little bubbles in my stomach. I'm doing it anyway. It's the tender edge. I feel a little bit distracted by the voices there, and I could feel wanting to make sure I was present with you, and also being conscious of the time and hosting this podcast all at the same, and thinking sometimes of the next question, and really getting my mind to get back to the present moment. So
love it.
That was a life for me.
Yeah, it's a skill to be able to kind of navigate all of that, and then to notice how it feels to navigate all that.
Yeah.
How is it to say this?
I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying it, but also a bit released because I contain multitudes.
Right. You too, huh?
Actually, it was really interesting because I met my ex-partner also at an authentic relating, and then we were doing a lot of these exercises. And for someone like me, and I feel something I share probably with especially a lot of men, we're often not comfortable sharing how we feel. At least for me, it's something quite like I feel seen. I feel so, which is great in a way, but also exposed.
Right. Yeah. And this happens a lot in my work. People share and they're exposed, and then we ground and we relax, and whatever that is. Often it's with touch or sound or earth or time, and that's important. That kind of in and out. We're exercising a muscle. If we lift weights all the time, we're going to break down. We have to go at a pace that works for ourselves. So thank you.
And it's actually a great place to meet people, I guess, friends, lover, because then you have a ground for
what's actually absolutely. Yeah, a lot of people have met at my courses, and absolutely, it keeps happening. Makes sense. I mean, they're like-minded when they show up, and then they meet someone in a deep connection in the workshop, and then they stay depth connected.
Yeah, because some workshops where you're very high vibe, maybe you meet someone and it was great, but then in everyday life doesn't work that well.
Right.
Well, at a raw, authentic relating, like a raw workshop.
Makes sense.
Because
it's like if you're gonna don't lie in a job interview, because if you get the job, you have to lie the whole time you have the job. It's like be authentic when you're meeting someone, then you can just be authentic as you're with them. It's the same idea.
Also, Rick, do you want to share a bit what's next for you?
Sure.
People can follow you.
Okay. Rick Smith on Facebook. My website is thetenderedge.com. It's all one word, thetenderedge.com. My next Awaken Leadership Retreat at 7 days in Ubud in Bali. It's coming up December 7th. After that, I'm not sure when the next one is, probably in the spring. And I do authentic relating every probably 6 weeks here in Bali. And it's an international organization, authenticrelating.co. And there's courses, online courses, and in-person courses all over the world. Yeah.
Well, Awaken Leadership is your creation.
That's my creation. And then if you're interested in my teaching background and all that stuff, it's consciousteaching.com. Yeah. Thanks.
Hopefully some of my listeners didn't hear the calls to get off Facebook so they can follow you there.
Yeah, just for me, really. Just I know it's a corporate, I know. Never mind, just go to the website.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank
I
you.
want to ask you to share a last word for the listener.
Just thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for taking some of your precious time to listen to this podcast. If you stayed until the end, I assume it was insightful. So if you like this podcast, please share with friends. Remember that if you tag us in your Instagram story at the LightLeaders podcast, we will repost. Tell us what you've learned. You can also leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Now, if you want to stay posted about new podcast releases, especially as we get censored more and more on big tech platforms, make sure to join our newsletter and our Telegram. You'll find the links on thelightleaders.org. And feel free to contact me directly too, whether it's for feedback or potential collaborations. Thank you again, and let's co-create the conscious new earth together.